At 7 a.m. on January 2, 1935, the quiet hum of early morning activity at the Hotel President in Kansas City was pierced by a sound that sent a chill through the staff. A hotel maid knocked gently on the door of room 1046. She had been instructed to check on the occupant, a young man who had been staying alone for 2 days. The usual clatter of dishes in the dining area, the low murmur of guests, and the distant whistle of streetcars contrasted sharply with the silence beyond the door. There was no answer. The maid knocked again, a little louder this time, but the silence persisted. Concern spread quickly among the staff. Something felt wrong. The door was locked from the inside. Panic mixed with curiosity. Staff tried rattling the handle, calling out the man's name as it appeared in the hotel register. Roland T. Owen. No reply. Finally, after repeated attempts, the door was forced open. What they found inside was horrifying. On the neatly made bed lay a young man, fully clothed, gravely injured, barely clinging to life. His skull bore a heavy fracture. His chest had deep lacerations, and his tongue was severely damaged. Blood had spattered across the walls, staining the pale wallpaper in grotesque patterns. Yet, amidst the chaos of his injuries, the room was oddly orderly. His clothes were neatly folded. His wallet lay open with no identification, and the phone had been ripped from its cradle. There was no weapon, no clear signs of a struggle. Only the blood and the young man's injuries told the story. He was rushed to the hospital, but hours later, he would die without ever speaking a word about what had happened. For the hotel staff, the scene was shocking. For the police, it was a baffling mystery. The hotel register listed his name as Roland T. Owen. But weeks later, investigators discovered his real identity. Artemus Ogletree, a 24-year-old man from Alabama. Why he used a false name, why he traveled alone to Kansas City, and who he was desperately trying to contact would remain unanswered questions for decades. Artemus had checked in on December 30, 1934. He arrived alone, well-dressed in a dark suit, carrying only a small suitcase. Quiet, reserved, and careful not to attract attention. He requested a room with no outside-facing windows, a seemingly trivial request that would later assume ominous significance. During his stay, he rarely left the room. He avoided conversation with staff and guests, yet repeatedly called the front desk, asking to be connected to a man named Don. No one by that name had been registered at the hotel. His polite but evasive behavior, combined with the repeated calls, made the staff uneasy. On the afternoon of December 31st, a maid entered the room to clean. The room was dimly lit, the curtains drawn tight, and the air smelled faintly of tobacco and hotel soap. Artemus sat on the edge of the bed, calm yet tense. She noticed bruises on his arms and neck. When she asked if he had been hurt, he claimed he had fallen in the bathtub. The explanation seemed insufficient, yet he said it with such composure that the maid hesitated to press further. She left, leaving a sense of unease behind her. Later that evening, a neighboring guest reported hearing loud voices coming from room 1046. An argument had broken out, they said, with a man shouting, "Get out of here!" Then silence. No one checked on the room that night. The hotel was busy with New Year's Eve celebrations, and the sounds of laughter and music carried down the hallways, drowning out any suspicion. The following morning, the maid returned. The door remained locked from the inside. When staff finally entered, the scene was as terrifying as it had been the day before. Artemus barely breathing, blood covering his chest and face, the room meticulously organized amid the carnage. His clothes folded, his belongings carefully arranged, and the phone ripped from the wall. The contrast between order and violence was chilling. He was rushed to the hospital, where he would die later that day. Weeks later, police uncovered his true identity. Artemus Ogletree, a young man from Alabama. But the questions only deepened. Why was he in Kansas City? Why did he assume a false identity? Who was Don, the mysterious man he had tried to reach? And how could someone inflict such horrific injuries in a locked room without leaving any evidence of their presence? Investigators struggled. Witnesses provided conflicting stories. Some reported seeing a shadowy figure near the hotel entrance in the days before his death. Others claimed to hear muffled cries late at night. The crime scene itself had been mishandled during the early stages of the investigation, leaving critical evidence lost forever. Several theories emerged. Some speculated that Artemis had crossed paths with organized crime. Perhaps he had been involved in a deal that went horribly wrong. Others believed he may have willingly let someone into the room, someone who vanished without a trace. But none of these theories accounted for the locked door, the meticulous arrangement of his belongings, or the desperate phone calls. As the days passed, the investigation delved into Artemis' life in Alabama. Friends and family described him as quiet, polite, and reserved, with no known enemies. He had never displayed behavior that hinted at involvement in crime or secret dealings. His sudden appearance in Kansas City under a false name, the strange request for a windowless room, and his repeated calls to a man no one could identify painted a picture of desperation and fear. The hotel itself became a focal point for speculation. Staff recalled the faint scent of tobacco and alcohol in the room, the way Artemis avoided eye contact, and his nervous glances at the hallway. Neighbors remembered the muffled shouting and the sudden silence that followed. Every small detail seemed to suggest a story that no one could piece together. Decades later, true crime enthusiasts and historians still examine room 1046. The peculiar detail of a windowless room, the careful placement of his belongings, and the ripped phone continue to fuel theories. Some believe Artemis may have been lured into a trap. Others think he was attempting to protect himself from an unknown threat. The hotel president itself, now decades older, stands as a silent witness to one of America's most perplexing unsolved mysteries. Room 1046 remains a symbol of the unknown, a place where a young man's life ended under circumstances that defy logic and reason. Visitors speak in hushed tones, imagining the terror that unfolded within those walls. For Artemis Ogletree, the details of his final hours are lost to time. The room, once the site of unimaginable violence, now serves as a reminder that some mysteries are never meant to be solved. A man checked in under a false name, made desperate calls to someone who never arrived, and died behind a locked door. The story continues to intrigue, unsettle, and haunt those who encounter it. Even today, nearly 90 years later, room 1046 exists. It is a reminder of a young life cut short, of questions that have no answers, and of a truth that remains forever elusive. And perhaps the most haunting question lingers still: what truly happened after the door was locked?